Canadian frat bros turned conservative YouTubers, the Nelk Boys, are drawing ire over their recent interview with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The interview is being bashed online from the left and the right, with many accusing the YouTubers of asking softball questions. They're also drawing criticism for neglecting to push back against some of Netanyahu's claims, according to some critics. Let's take a look.
You definitely have a tough job, but why do you think you're like so hated worldwide?
Well, a lot of propaganda. First of all, I'm not hated worldwide. The propaganda is there. I don't deny it. But people also have, sometimes the truth beckons. And what Israel did with President Trump is safeguard free societies from a menace. I mean, this Iranian regime hangs gays from cranes, shoots women on the sidewalk for not covering their hair, oppresses their people, spreads terrorism worldwide.
Their Full Send podcast is popular among young men on the internet, but their channel lost over 10,000 followers in one day because of the interview. The interview covered a wide range of topics, from Gaza to New York City Democratic mayoral nominee Zohran Mamdani, and even featured this moment that's catching a lot of heat. Let's watch.
What's one thing you and President Trump have in common? Like something like specific, like a hobby, or like something you both like, or like a food?
Hamburgers. I like Burger King more.
What's your go-to at McDonald's?
No, I'll tell you, Burger King. We did the double,
Whopper?
the double.
I haven't ripped Burger King in a long time.
Burger King kind of sucks.
Yeah.
No,
The
you're wrong.
BK Lounge can hit.
I disagree completely.
You like Burger King over McDonald's?
That's your worst take, I think.
Absolutely.
Social media went off on the interview. Editor of Current Affairs Nathan J. Robinson says, quote, "The rise of idiot interviewers like Friedman, Rogan, Vaughn, and the Nelk Boys is very harmful to journalism. They somehow manage to be worse than mainstream media. They are walking PSAs for the importance of reading books."
Others disagreed. Internet personality Ayel Jacoby writes, the Nelk Boys asked tougher questions to Netanyahu than Tucker Carlson did with the president of Iran. Interesting. I guess I disagree with like all of this.
All of it?
Well, all the comments we just read. And I don't think it's. If you do a long interview, I don't know how long this went on. It's okay to ask to have a small amount of that time be jokey or more fun or softer questions. So I am not bothered that they got asked what his Happy Meal order is. Now, if you only talk to him for 8 minutes and that's a significant part of it, then yes, you should be criticized. I don't think that's what it was. It went on for a long time. It was an hour-long interview. I don't know these guys, by the way. I'm pretty familiar with podcasting land, especially conservative podcasting land, and I don't know them. But I presume they're popular with people younger than I am. I think it does go to show you how disfavored Netanyahu and the Israeli government is among basically everyone online, all young people on the right. This is an issue that really skews in a anti-Israeli government policy direction for left and right meeting on this, and that's kind of the audience for a lot of these things. I think that should be a cautionary tale for Republican political leaders like Trump himself not to be overly on board with what Netanyahu is doing with Iran and with Gaza, where people are like starving to death now, and it's awful. And I wish there was more attention on that and a greater effort to get the U.S. to be not involved and complicit in it, which is something the America First wing of the Republican Party, people like Thomas Massie and to some extent Marjorie Taylor Greene, want to accomplish. Thomas Massie had a vote to stop funding some aspect of Israel's defense that got support from a couple members of the squad, but not AOC for some reason. And they speak for a lot of young people and even a lot of young conservative people. So you have to listen. You have to listen to your fans. It tells you something. I listen to the feedback I get from this show. I'm sure I have takes all the time that people listening don't agree with, and our show's a little different because you and I don't agree, and so there are people who like you watching and people like me watching. But if I'm consistently saying things that a lot of the people watching don't agree with, that has been a clue to me in the past that I'm probably out of touch with where the right is on something, and I think that's a good lesson here too.
I think the biggest issue is that, the Nelk Boys allowed Netanyahu to use their platform as like a rebranding tool, right? And so you wonder why he would go to a pop culture platform, because he knows that he's probably going to get more softball questions. The issue for me is that people should not look at podcasters, and this is not a condescending statement in any way, they should look at them as conversationalists and not journalists, because there's a distinct difference in what's going to happen there. And even the Nelk Boys said, the Full Send host said that they didn't understand the Israel-Palestine conflict, and they were hoping to, quote, get educated. So when you have an interview, you can't allow them to educate you, because there's messaging involved, especially when it comes to a politician, right? There's a distinct message that they're generally trying to get across, unless they're completely out of office. And even still then, like we see Obama doing now, there's an alignment with the Democratic Party or where he wants to see it go. So he'll say certain nuggets in order to push it that way. And so I think with Netanyahu, because that's such a sensitive topic, it would have behooved them not to try to become journalists, but to take the time to at least get to know what was happening and not be so starstruck in a way, which what it felt in the room, to just allow him to just say anything and allow him to say that it's all propaganda and everyone's against him. I think that people are really scared also because criticism of Netanyahu has become somehow anti-Semitic, and really he's just another world leader that is allowed to be wrong. And so even if there was a hesitancy for them to push back too much, because then they might be labeled in a way that they don't want to, I also understand that, because once it takes fire that you are this or that online, it's like a whole cancel culture thing that we always talk about. And so I totally think that we should just step back and require, since there's so many voices in the room, which is a good thing, people just to do a little bit more. And that comes from the audience, because we're required to do a little bit more, because like you said, they chose us for these roles to be actually informed, to have conversations about topics. But on the same token, because your audience is the one holding you to the standard and paying your bills in some ways on YouTube, or if you're writing for yourself online, let the audience correct you. And so if you're hearing people from all who didn't even know about your show complain about this, perhaps take this as a lesson and a learning moment for the future, to not handle situations that are as sensitive, particularly as this one, with a leader that's riled people up to the level that Netanyahu has in this degree, because that's a huge interview to get regardless.
Well, and why not just follow it up? I mean, the advice I would give to them is now follow that interview up with an interview with someone who disagrees very strongly with Netanyahu's policies with Iran and Gaza.
Them. Right.
And, right. If they don't know a lot about it, that's fine. And you can even have someone on from the right who is critical, like Tucker Carlson, or if you can't get a Tucker Carlson, Dave Smith will appear on anyone's podcast, and in my view, does a good job of explaining why we shouldn't be involved in that conflict. I share his perspective, but I would be the wrong person to do that, because I'm not an expert on this either, despite having had to
and
talk
I don't
about
mind
it a
the
whole
debate,
lot
though. I don't think it
Rising.
makes people uncomfortable anymore. Like when you look at Piers Morgan's show, for example, when you look at Cuomo's show on News Nation, like the debating, the argument getting uncomfortable is fine, right? Like, when we see Cenk on Chris Cuomo's show, I don't get uncomfortable about that. All right, he has a very firm opinion, but I want to hear from somebody that also has a firm opinion that's separate from yours, to see who I align with more. And then the key part of this is go do your own homework, right? One source is not enough these days, especially because people have feelings about traditional media and people have feelings about online digital media. But both of the worlds are going to coexist. This is where we are. And so I think people need to just be cognizant that they can't take one person's word as law, especially when they're not trained to try to be completely unbiased, which is a very almost impossible task for most people.
Yeah. I would, and go to Nathan Robinson's point about this new podcast verse being even worse than the mainstream media. I don't agree with that. I do think sometimes these interviews get just way too friendly, or you just let the person talk forever and ever and ever without saying, well, but wait about this. These people have demonstrated. Joe Rogan, when he really wants to, can be like pushes back. He doesn't do that all the time. I think a little bit more. I would turn up the dial on pushback a little bit more. I still think I usually get more out of these interviews, just letting the person talk, because it goes on and on and on forever. I think you tend to get more out of it than the quicker cable news interview where the political figure talks for 20 seconds and then the host who's trying to gotcha them interrupts them and say, but what about that? I don't know. And also, people are just deciding they don't like that format as much. They like the long-form internet format better.
But also,
like the market is deciding, so
and there's this, like, we had Roseanne Barr here a couple weeks ago, and that conversation was a lot of things. But what I know is at the end of that interview, I asked her questions that may have one would think outside looking in made her feel uncomfortable because particularly as a black woman sitting there, I have to ask those questions, right?
Yeah,
and as a journalist, those are the right things to do. At the end of the interview, when the cameras went off, what did she say? Thank you. Her team also said, thank you for asking me those questions. And I think there's a way to ask them without trying to make it a gotcha moment. Even if you're a podcaster, you can either be trying to have a moment because you want to embarrass someone, or you can be trying to have a moment because you want to actually understand someone. And those are distinctly different and should be, the only difference is that you actually care to find out the answer, not care to hear your rebuttal out loud and how much it's going to embarrass them. Yeah. And so that's the biggest thing that I think people have to stop being scared of that are entering this podcasting space, which is arguably getting bigger than traditional media.
Absolutely. We've got a lot more to talk about today on Rising. Please stay with us.